So we're finally going to talk about Lapis. Okay, so this is the basic Maddening Lapis guide, and in this guide I'm going to go over classes she is good on, her growth rates, what her pros and cons are, and other aspects of the unit that I think are relevant. So to begin, let's talk about her growths. So Lapis has decent growths, but she does have two things that kind of hold her back long term, and that is her HP growth and her strength growth. She has 55% HP growth, 25% strength, 20% magic, 35% dex, 55% speed, 35% defense, 30% res, 25% luck, and 5% build. So, of her stats, I do really like her speed. Her strength is okay, it can be fixed with a better class. Her defense and res are decent. Her dex is okay. Her health is kind of poor. 55% health growth rate isn't the best. So she does have durability issues to some degree. Her speed prevents her from getting doubled, but she still can get one shotted by certain things. But we're going to go over that. And classes. All right, so her passive, share spoils. If an ally is within one space, grants hit plus avoid hit slash avoid plus 10 at the cost of crit minus 10. So if you're running a crit build on her, this will hurt her ability to crit directly. If you are not running a crit build on her, this is just pure upside. I don't know if that's become a meme, but I'll just roll with it. All right. So pros and cons of the unit. So pros, she is, I would say, decent early on. She doesn't have like a ton of speed. She has enough speed where she usually doubles with her iron sword, and she doesn't double with too much else. She might be able to get away with running a steel sword because she does start out as a sword fighter. You would probably want to have Sigurd on it, the Sigurd engraving, and she could potentially double with that. She does have low build. She has a build of 5 when you get her, and she has a build growth rate of 5%, so it's going to take quite a while, 20 level ups on fixed mode, to see another increase in build. So even though she has high speed, she does have lower build, and that can cause her to not double and to be slower than you would expect. Now, the strength can be improved by switching classes, so that is something that is decent. It's like 25% isn't the end of the world because you can get it to 45 on most like strength based classes. So that's not the worst thing. In terms of investment, like how much do you have to go out of your way to set up kills for her or use her? I would say she's like low, maybe medium, depending on how much you want to level her up. She's not going to pop off right away with the right weapon. She's going to do okay. She's not going to be like a hard carry early game, so you kind of have to funnel kills into her to some degree, set up opportunities for her to get kills. She's not going to be walking up to enemies and one rounding them unless you run some really specific strategy or do something like throw Marth on her and get her to bond rank 10 and do some Mercurius shenanigans, which a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people do that, and that's fine. But if that's what makes her good, then arguably that makes anyone good. So if you're just playing the game normally without doing super optimized min maxing, like you're just having units attack things and then upgrading their equipment as you go, I would say she's like low to medium level of investment. Now, if you invest in her, does she pop off? I don't think so. I think she just becomes decent. I don't think she ever hits like high peaks. She just kind of hits like a plateau and will do okay, but will never blow your mind with how much damage she's dealing or how effective she is. So, okay. So let's talk about best classes for the unit. So the game defaults her on Sword Fighter and she progresses into Sword Master. On Sword Master, she has very low strength and she can be okay on this. I've seen some people running builds of her on Sword Master. I tried her out on Sword Master. She's okay on this, but it's definitely not her best thing. It's on swords, which is the lowest might weapon. So combined with her low strength and the low might of Swordmaster, I don't think that's the best thing for her. Swordmaster also only increases strength growth by 10%, which is on the lower side. So that just puts her at 35% strength growth. So you combine low strength growth with low might swords in her base low strength, and you're looking at hitting almost nothing. So even if you run something like a crit build, it's going to deal pretty low damage. Honestly, I think a crit build on her doesn't even make sense because of her passive. So I feel like she's better off on other things. And those other things actually could be potentially A tier. All right, so Halberdier. This one doesn't really make sense on her either, because Halberdier, if you want to make the most out of this class, is reserved, in my opinion, for units who cannot double ever because they're just too slow. Their base speed is terrible. Their speed growth is terrible. You can throw any, and you want them with high strength so that you can throw them on Halberdier and they can one round, because Halberdier always lets you double. So you can get away with running a heavy, you can put like Ike on a Brave Lance and you'll still double. So you always quad as long as you set up pincer attack. You can give them, a Silver Lance with Ike on it. Like, you can give them the craziest, most ridiculous weapons that are insanely heavy, and they'll always double with them as long as the weapon can double. So like, you can't double with like a Silver Great Lance, for example. So, but if the weapon is capable of doubling, you can pump that weapon with stat increase and emblems that increase the damage at the cost of weight, and you will get away with some nonsense that you shouldn't be allowed to, but it's actually quite effective and deals a ton of damage. So that can be an okay option for her, but I don't think it's her best, because she does have high speed, and that's really her redeeming feature. So it's kind of just like throwing her speed out the window and assuming she's not going to be going for doubling naturally. Berserker could be decent just to fix her strength temporarily. Berserker does have a dex cap of 25, but you could throw her on Berserker just to try to get her strength levels. Berserker gives plus 30% strength and plus 10% build, so this would help fix her build and her strength. So if you leveled her up 10 times on Berserker, that could be worth it, just to pump her strength up a bit. And also, it wouldn't be the worst thing. It gives her access to axes, which increases her might. So Warrior would also be a decent option for this exact same thing, except Warrior has a little bit less strength growth. Warrior has 20% versus Berserker's 30. So if you're looking to just improve her strength for a few level ups before switching her into her final class, I would say Berserker makes more sense. Warrior is definitely the better class of the two because it gives you access to bows, and bows can shoot down flyers. So this allows her to use like an engraved axe that has increased hit and use bows. So this could be okay. Sniper. I wouldn't do Sniper because her passive is anti-crit and Sniper is a crit class. I wouldn't do Bow Knight. Her low might isn't going to help her here. I wouldn't do General or Great Knight because her only her biggest asset is her speed, so you're just throwing out speed and just not letting her double. Paladin, she could be okay on Paladin. Paladin's kind of like a generalist that it does give you access to just one weapon, but she could be okay on it. So, let me just pull up its growths. Paladin. Where is it? Oh, it's down here. Okay. So Paladin has 15% speed and strength. So some of the advanced classes give you like 20% strength or 20% speed and kind of like low in the other. So you'll get like 20% strength on Wyvern and 5% speed, or like 10% strength on Griffin and 20% speed. Paladin gives you 15% strength and speed, which is decent. It has okay base stats. She could be a decent Paladin. She'd be okay on it. Wolf Knight. I think her strength is too low to run Wolf Knight well. I think her strength, like her low strength, will be a constant problem for her, so she needs something that can fix it. Griffin Knight, she can be okay on this. So some people have made the argument that if Chloe is so good on Flyer and Lapis has similar growths to her, why isn't Lapis as good on Flyer? Lapis has much less health and you get her later on, and Chloe starts off with really good speed. Pegasus Knight, I'm sorry, Lance Flyer, which is basically Pegasus Knight, has higher base speed, and I believe Chloe's base speed is higher as well. And even if it's not, the fact that there's higher base speed on Chloe's class immediately allows her to start one-rounding things with the Steel Lance, and this snowballs her. So then by the time you get Lapis, she's already out-leveled her. So even though they have similar bases, you get them at different points in the game, and it does matter. But I've personally run a Griffin Knight Lapis. like the entire playthrough on my first Maddening run, and she felt very weak the entire time. So I don't recommend it. All right, Wyvern Knight. This is probably her best class, and I would run a Lance and Sword Wyvern. So this gives her access to Air Raid. This gives her really high speed. It is slightly less speed than Griffin Knight, but it gives you higher base strength, the same base strength as Halberdier. It gives you 6 build, 6 move. It also gives you 5% build growth. So you get 5% build growth, you get 20% strength growth. So this puts her at 10% build growth and 45% strength growth. She gets 5% speed, she gets more health. That puts her at 75% health. She gets more defense. It'll put her at, I think, 55% defense growth. Yeah, and then for res, she will have, let's see, on the res, she will get plus 5 res, so she'll be put at 35% res, which is okay. But this basically fixes her. 45% strength, 10% build, so every 10 level up, she gets a point of build, which helps offset the weapon weight. She can still use swords. She could use steel sword, silver sword. The silver sword will need upgraded and engraved to have weight reduction on it. So something like Celica engraving could be fine on it. She could also use a spear. Spear might make the most sense, like a steel spear or a steel lance. Steel Lance has pretty low weight, so it's not going to slow her down too much, and then you're going to be taking advantage of her speed, fixing her strength, and over time fixing her build. Air Raid also enables doubling in situations where you can't, as long as you can attack from out of bounds on enemies who can't go in those spaces. So if you attack from a flyers only tile, you can set up her doubling. I think this is her best class. I don't think anything else would be better than this on her, because of the way her growths work, the way her passive works. She has like a crit build. She has crit build friction, so I don't want to put her on crits. She has crit build friction for a few reasons. It's the low strength that hurts. Like if you have high strength and you're on a crit build, then you can one-shot a lot of things. But if you're low strength on a crit build, even when you get the crit, you're probably not going to be one-shotting things. And especially as you hit mid and end game and enemy defense levels start getting higher and higher, she's going to have a hard time even dealing damage. So you're going to want to get her might up. So I would say have her run lances on Wyvern, and she should be able to put in work. And she can also run utility swords and utility lances. So you could run like Armor Slayer. Now, I don't recommend her being an Armor Slayer. I would rather have like Marin do it because she has better strength. But you could have her be an Armor Slayer. Levin Sword, maybe. She does have low magic. So like if we go to Griffin Knight, she has quite poor magic. Her magic level is pretty low as well. But you could run Rider's Bane, that would be decent. Just to like poke enemy Wolf Knights, because you're not going to be doubling those Wolf Knights anyways, unless you're like running Speed Taker or something specific. But I think Wyvern Knight is her best class because of her passive. You also can take advantage of her passive now, so you can increase her accuracy and increase her avoid on a fast class, which actually makes sense now instead of going for crits. And you basically fix her strength, and you help fix her build. You fix her build a little bit, getting her onto 6 build definitely helps, and having her be on lances helps. And you could use swords, but you'd have to level her up a bit and maybe even use an energy dropper too if you want her to use swords. I would skip magic classes on her. 20% magic growth isn't the worst, because like on Sage that'd be 50%, but why bother? You know, she doesn't have, like, look at that mage stat. This is internal level of, I want to say like 20, because I reclassed her into Halberdier after she had a few level ups in Swordmaster. So internal level 20 Sage is 12 magic. She's not a good mage. Martial Monk, Martial Master, she might be okay at these, but she doesn't have, like, Chloe has higher, let me see. Yeah, Chloe has 25% strength and 35% magic, so she's the better Martial Master, because she has combined strength magic growths that are higher, whereas Lapis just has 25 and 20. So and also she has higher base magic. So if you want a good Martial Master, they need high base strength and magic, or at least average in both, and then good growth rates on both. And then High Priest I would skip. So I would say her best classes are Halberdier, but this isn't her best class. I would say Halberdier is decent. Paladin is good. Warrior could be decent. Warrior actually might make a lot of sense. Warrior, I'd say, is up there. I think Wyvern is their absolute best class, just based on how good Wyvern is and how flexible it can be with like switching weapons and breaking with different weapon types. Warrior is really good too. It also helps with the build, but it forces her on axes. So build of 8 on axes really isn't that impressive. She's going to be slowed down a lot. The main advantage of Warrior would be the high strength and using bows. So maybe as a bow user on Warrior, she pops off, but she's also stuck at C, rank C bows. So no silver bow, no brave bow, no anything like high impact, just like steel bow, long bow, stuff like that. So she'd be kind of capped in terms of might in that way. But I think Halberdier is decent. Paladin is really strong, and I think Wyvern is the best class for her. Griffin can be okay, but she's gonna have strength problems, and she's not gonna be like Chloe, who has those early levels to power level herself just by being good. Just by doubling and one rounding with Steel Lance. Okay, so those are the classes. So let's go over passives. There might be some minor spoilers in some of these. I have different units and different saves. Let's see, where's she? Here she is. All right. So early passives. So if you want to go the avoid route on her, that's not bad. So you can run avoid plus 10 and perceptive. This is pretty cheap. Perceptive is actually really good for attacking. This also would be decent on Halberdier or Wyvern, like pretty much anything you're attacking on. Getting avoid plus 15 when you initiate, and also scaling avoid with speed on a unit who's fast makes a lot of sense. Perceptive plus is also interesting. It basically allows a unit to attack without getting counterattacked effectively. Anything on Celica I would skip. Sigurd, Canter makes sense on her. I don't think she needs hit. Momentum would be okay on her. Lance power would be okay on her if you plan on running her on Wyvern. So what you might want to do if you plan on making her a Lance Wyvern is getting Lance power before you lose Sigurd on chapter 10/11, really on chapter 11. And then when you reclass her, or you could reclass her early using you can second seal before that chapter. Then you can make use of Lance power on Wyvern, stab some dudes with lances. This will help boost her damage up a little bit. Leaf actually does make sense on her. Getting build plus 3 is pretty affordable, 500 SP, pretty easy to get. So if you do want to make her a Lance Wyvern, getting her build plus 3 will help her use Silver Lances, and also will make Steel Lances basically weightless. So that'll help her like in a huge way. Build plus 3 is pretty decent on her. Roy, strength plus 1, strength plus 2 are decent. Holdout, you'd have to get late game if you want to run it. Sword power can be good on her if you want to keep her on like sword Wyvern. So if you want her to stay on swords, you can get sword power 1 and then eventually sword power 2. You should be able to easily get sword power 1 if you throw an emblem ring on her to build up SP as she levels up. And then with sword power 2, you will have to get this late game. So you'll probably want to run something else like in between there. So maybe like mentorship from Byleth just to like get more SP. But yeah, these are for like early to mid game, these guides, just for like setting up the unit. And then I'm going to be doing late game builds as well. For Lyn, so this is like kind of mid game now. So like Lyn, speed is good. You can't go wrong with speed. If you want to save up for Speed Taker, that can be good on her, especially if you're going to be running Wyverns. That way she can run around killing things and building up speed. And then if you want to run anything on Erica, I'm not so sure most of these are good, like Lance Agility. Getting Avoid at the cost of crit could be okay. It's quite expensive though for what you're getting. Like Avoid plus 15 for 1k SP barely feels worth it. It doesn't really seem to be that good. And then Ike. Defense plus is okay. I wouldn't run it on her. Resolve is okay, but it doesn't seem like it's worth it to run. Axe power, I don't think she should be on axes, but if you want to run axes on her, axe power is good. Wrath is good for crit builds, but she doesn't have a big health pool, so she can't make like good use of this, and she's kind of frail to some degree. Her defensive stats are decent, and her growths are decent on it, but she still will have low max HP unless you put her on something like Wyvern. but you could run a Wrath build if you want. She just has a passive that kind of works against your crit. And then Micaiah, I wouldn't run anything on. Lucina, I wouldn't really use anything on her. Maybe Dual Assist if she's going to be on Halberdier. That kind of makes sense. And then eventually Dual Assist Plus. Now, you could run her on Hero, but that's kind of like giving up, in my opinion. Well, all right. So if you're going to run a Hero team comp, then fine. It'll be decent. But it'll be decent because of Hero's passive, not because she's individually contributing a lot. So you can run Hero on her if you want to. I don't think it's the best thing. All right, let's go over items really quickly for her builds. So let's say... So here are like Halberdier things. Brionix late game, but this Steel Lance is an early game weapon that I usually give to Chloe. But you could give her this or this Steel Lance here. This actually was her Steel Lance. I used Celica to reduce the weight, and she did okay using this. So you want to second seal her immediately into Wyvern with lances, and then hand her something like this. And before then, she can just use a steel sword, with this engraving, or with Sigurd. It can be difficult though because her low strength early game is kind of hard to play around. She's not going to be easily killing things, and her low build is also a problem. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I think she's a decent unit with investment, and honestly, on Wyvern, she might even be A tier. So I'm gonna do on my 5th run, I'll run her as a Wyvern and see how she performs. But based on the growth rates and the availability, I think that she could hit A tier and be like a solid Wyvern that doubles with good damage output. She just needs a little bit of stat fixing and min-maxing in terms of build. So yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. And also feel free to drop a comment on how you build your Lapis on Maddening. And also mention if you use DLC or not, because that does change builds drastically. All right, peace.